So what is the current consensus about tipping points and how serious they are? Well, this is a grid based on the latest Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change report with various types of possible tipping point that we've talked about. And we're asking for each one, does it have positive feedback? So can it grow upon itself? Does it cause abrupt change or just gradual change? Is it irreversible? And does it actually matter? Will it cause an economic shock and damage large parts of the world? So we look at sea ice melt. That's definitely positive feedback. As the sea ice goes away, you get more and more heat, which we're already seeing. Is it abrupt? Well, maybe not. I mean, it could well be that it'll run away at some point and we'll end up with Arctic, which never has any sea ice and fully melted in summer. Irreversible? Probably. It would take a lot to reverse it. But the economic shock, I mean, really, a hot Arctic by itself may even be a good thing. It's not necessarily a global disaster. The AMOC, Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, there's positive feedback. As it gets warmer, that definitely works. Abrupt change, again, maybe. Some people think it will definitely happen at some point, but that point might be hundreds of years away. Irreversible, again, unclear. Economic shock, vast. This would devastate world economy and make half of Europe uninhabitable and so on. So enormous economic shocks. How about the ice sheets? This, remember, is the ice sheets on Greenland and Antarctica melting. It's definitely positive feedback. Not clear how abrupt it would be. Irreversible for sure. It may already be irreversible. Economic shock, yes, in the sense it could flood large parts of many of the world's cities, but the time scale could be hundreds to thousands of years, and it may be rather hard to get people worried about, if you pollute now, your great grandchildren won't be able to live here. Thousands of years also gives us a lot of time to move our cities. Methane class rates are no longer considered to be a major issue. Cloud changes, yes, there's probably positive feedback. It won't be abrupt, at least not for a long time. Definitely irreversible. Economic shock, yes, but it's probably a fair way away. Then we're looking at the release of carbon dioxide from various forms. Definitely positive feedback, probably not abrupt. Unclear. One thing I didn't mention was permafrost and tundra. There's a lot of carbon dioxide locked up in there that might melt. That's definitely a positive feedback, but probably not abrupt and irreversible. Air conditioning against positive feedback, but it's not abrupt and it's not irreversible and wouldn't cause a huge economic shock. So really, none of these things meet all the definitions of a tipping point. There's lots of things that cause positive feedback that'll make global warming worse. But how much worse and how rapidly, and is it irreversible? This is one of the reasons why many researchers in this field think we shouldn't be using the terminology of tipping points. If we say that making the world warmer is going to raise sea levels, we should just say making the world warmer will cause the ice sheets to flow into the sea and make it warmer. We don't call it a tipping point. Likewise, we say there's some risk that the circulation could change that will affect the climates around the world. Why don't we say that rather than use a tipping point terminology? This, of course, is up for debate. The people who argue we shouldn't use the terminology tipping point say that it's imprecise. It means too many different things, which are all somewhat different, and nothing quite fits a perfect definition of a tipping point. So why not be clear? If we're being a bit vague about these things and confusing things, that gives the enemies of science more things they can pounce on. They can say, oh, you're inconsistent, you've confused different things. So by being very, very clear, and given there are many people who've a vested interest in saying that climate change is not real, you maybe want to be very honest and very clear about these things. It's problematic because it bundles together and confounds different issues which are somewhat different. And perhaps an interesting factor is why some opponents of climate change are now quite in favour of the tipping point argument. The idea is that if we've passed the tipping point, it's all over, it's too late, we're doomed, we're all going to die, it's how terrible. And that means that if people think that's the case, oh, it's too late, we've already passed the tipping point, they give up. They're not going to keep on trying to fight for do better policies for climate change. That's exactly what the opponents of climate change would like. So the whole tipping point terminology seems to suggest that once you've passed it, you're dead, it's too late. You can argue that maybe it's a good thing because it says, look, we're at a real risk, we've got to act now. But it could just make people feel so despondent and despairing that they just stop doing anything. And indeed, a lot of people, that's the case. There's climate depression is a major issue for many young people today. It also has biases in priority settings and distortions of policies away from long-term planning. If there could be some unknown tipping point coming soon, what's the point of long-term planning? So, tipping points, are they real? With certainly many feedback loops that could cause a small change in temperature to have really big consequences, which could be really disastrous. But maybe we should just leave it at that and not use the tipping point terminology. But the tipping point terminology is used quite heavily, so this is what it means. It's talking about usually it's feedback cycles that amplify the effect of global warming, and these are very real, and they could make things much worse. There's a lot of scientific uncertainty about how bad they are, but it's certainly something to keep in mind.